Hey everybody, Dr. Segrin here. Once again, you guessed it, talking about coronavirus. Um, today I'm going to talk about various medications that might work to help treat the coronavirus. And I'll also give an update on a few other topics that we had talked about previously that we now know a few more things about. So let's get right into it. Coronavirus, let's talk about the medicine. Broadly speaking, there are kind of a range of different medicines that might work against the coronavirus. And I'll go through each one of these, but broadly, we can talk about vaccines and any progress that we made on vaccines and the timeline that it might take to get a vaccine. Then there are therapeutic options, which are not so much about treating the virus or trying to kill the virus or preventing somebody from getting the virus, but they're simply things that we can do that help people survive the virus and do better even if they have the virus. So I'll go through some examples of those kinds of things. And in that same line, we also have some options for anti-inflammatories and anti-pneumonia medications. These are things, again, that don't really treat the virus, but they just try to keep your body going so that your own body can defeat the virus. And then finally, the last category we will talk about are a branch of drugs called antivirals. Those are specifically designed to target and mess with the virus itself and hopefully kill it or disrupt its proceedings in your body. So let's get through those, and I'll give you examples of all these things and how they work as we move through. So we'll start with vaccines. We've talked about vaccines before in a previous video, how a vaccine is something that you take to prevent you from getting a disease or a virus, and it stimulates your body to make antibodies. And it stimulates your immune system to make antibodies against the virus before you even get it. So it's usually some kind of dead virus that you inject inside your body. So why don't we have this yet? And if you watch the news, there's a lot of talk about vaccines and some companies testing a vaccine, or it's being tested on humans, or etc. It's a complicated process. Basically, when we talk about a timeline for a vaccine, a huge chunk of that timeline is the testing and trial phase. And the idea is that we want to determine two things about a vaccine. Does it actually work? So how many people that you give the vaccine still get the virus, even though they got the vaccine for it? So basically, how effective is it? And the other really important thing is, are there any side effects to that? And there are complications with both of these steps. So let's go with the first one. To actually test vaccines on humans, typically what they do, kind of the humane way to do it, is that we give a group of people the vaccine and we throw them out into the world where the virus is in circulation, and over some number of months or maybe even a year, we see how many of the people that we gave the vaccine to actually got the virus, and we compare that to the normal population. And if pretty much everybody that we gave the vaccine to, nobody got the virus, and the population, a whole bunch of people got it, then we can assume that the vaccine worked. The problem is with that right now is that we're trying to control the virus, so we're trying to reduce the amount of virus that's circulating in the population, and you really need a population where it's kind of running wild to test the vaccine properly, and we really don't have that in the world right now. So yeah, that technique takes time, and you need a population that has a lot of the virus so you can test just sort of the natural proceedings of the vaccine. There is another option for testing vaccines, which is if you have a group of volunteers that are willing to get the vaccine, and then that same group is also willing to expose themselves to the virus. So that means you're going to purposefully infect yourself with the virus to see if the vaccine works. That is another option. That's generally considered to be inhumane for human trials. But it seems like there are some people that are willing to do that right now that are very brave and heroic. So I don't know that, but you can see that there is some difficulties there, and that's going to take a considerable amount of time just to test to see if the vaccine actually works. Something else that you have to make sure with a vaccine is that there are no major side effects, and there are some famous examples of vaccines that had side effects. The 1976 swine flu vaccine. I remember I was talking about vaccines with my father-in-law, and he said that that was the last vaccine he ever got because it made him so incredibly sick, and yeah, he just felt awful after he got this vaccine. And yeah, apparently in some percentage of people, it actually caused significant nerve damage and muscle damage to them. It was a vaccine that was kind of rushed. In 1976, there was a soldier that died of the swine flu, and government officials thought this one could be comparable to the 1918 flu pandemic, the Spanish flu, which was also, they thought at the time, was traced back to pigs. I think now it's more accepted it was related to birds. Regardless, they kind of rushed out this vaccine in the 76, and they put all these campaigns out to get people to get vaccinated, and then a lot of people ended up getting sick from the vaccine itself, and the flu wasn't even that bad. So that was widely considered as like one of the worst vaccine rollouts that's ever happened, and we don't want a repeat of that for some coronavirus vaccine. So we really need to test the vaccine on a substantial number of people, and make sure that really nobody's getting side effects. With this swine flu vaccine, only something like 1 out of 100,000 were having really severe side effects, but because they vaccinated millions and millions of people, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world with it, that meant there were hundreds, if not thousands, of these severe reactions to this vaccine. So you really need to test it on a large number of people to make sure that it's okay. Because again, when this thing would be rolled out, worldwide, we're talking about billions of people that would need to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. And so you really need to understand the side effects before you start giving something to billions of people. So that's part of the issues with vaccines right now. Another issue, if you manufacture a vaccine, once you figure out one that works and doesn't have side effects, again, a vaccine is kind of like a dead virus, generally, that you inject yourself with. And the dead virus has enough of the surface proteins on it that create, that let your immune system create antibodies for it, that it can get your immune system ready for the real virus, is the idea. But you need to grow the virus in order to create the vaccine. And you need to grow a lot of the virus. And to do that, you need some kind of cells. Remember, viruses can't grow on their own. They have to infect cells. So you have to grow the cells for the virus to infect, and then you need to harvest these viruses, kill them, and inject them into people. I know with the flu vaccine each year, some of the easiest cells to do flu vaccines to grow flu viruses in are chicken cells, and they can actually use chicken eggs to grow flu viruses to make the flu vaccine, but it takes like millions of eggs, apparently. I was listening to a bit on NPR. So there needs to be some kind of comparable cell culture to grow the viruses to make the vaccine for the coronavirus. And I'm not sure if chicken eggs would work or not. So that's another challenge. And last big challenge with a vaccine is that, are you making one that can be easily transported anywhere in the world to any country and community? Does it need to be refrigerated? Because that's going to add a lot to the distribution cost. Does it need to be injected? If it needs to be injected, then you need to train people to actually inject this. You can't just hand it to anybody. And that's going to add an extra step to getting everybody vaccinated, even if you had a vaccine. Ideally, you would have a vaccine that was administered through the nose, and that would simplify it and make it so that kind of anybody could administer it to themselves. But that probably would take more time to develop that particular vaccine. So getting a vaccine rolled out is not easy. I would not expect it for months and months and months, if not over a year from now. So I'm not really holding my breath for a vaccine anytime soon, and those are the reasons why. It's a complicated process to get it all done. So let's move on to other things then. So vaccines probably will be here eventually, but in the meantime, what do we have here? Options. If you watch the news, you're probably hearing about different medications and therapeutical techniques that come up all the time, and so I just want to briefly go over the science of all these and what works and what doesn't, and what's bogus and what isn't. So therapeutics, again, these are things that don't necessarily treat the disease, but rather just keep your body going. Something like an IV drip, where you're just maintaining fluid levels in your body, just kind of keeping your body healthy as it fights off the virus. Another thing would be the ventilators that they use to keep people breathing and keep their lungs going for as long as they can. And a significant number of people that go on the ventilators actually do come off them. So it does really help people. And again, this doesn't do anything to kill the virus. It's just keeping your body alive long enough for your body to recover and defeat the virus. So something else I heard about is that with overweight patients that have the coronavirus and are having difficulty breathing, just putting them on their bellies and putting them kind of in more like a massage table so that the weight of their body isn't on top of their lungs really helps them breathe, and was seemingly having a beneficial effect for people that had severe coronavirus cases. So those options are continuing to get better and better understood, and that's certainly helping people survive. It's not a cure by any long shot, but it will help people survive. Other things that work. So last video lecture, we talked about what the coronavirus actually does to people who have very severe cases, and we talked about how pneumonia typically develops in people's lungs. And as a reminder, pneumonia is when you get fluid in the lungs. So here on this cool, I think this is not an x-ray, it's like a CAT scan or something, you can see a healthy lung on the left and the lungs on the right are covered in this stuff. That's all this junk that's coming in from swelling and immune cells and bacteria and dead cells and viruses, all sort of sloshing around in your lungs, blocking your airways so that you can't get any oxygen into your body. And that's actually what is killing most people. And so the idea here is that several doctors and scientists have had the idea that, hey, maybe if we can just treat the pneumonia, we can keep people from dying from the coronavirus. And I think to a certain extent that is a good attitude to take. So antibiotics are commonly used when people have the coronavirus. Antibiotics don't kill viruses, but they do kill bacteria. And so you can reduce the bacterial growth in your lungs, and that will help you survive and will help the pneumonia condition in people. And things like anti-inflammatories, those are drugs that reduce swelling. And again, part of what seems to be causing severe cases of COVID-19, of coronavirus, is excess swelling, which I think we've all had something. You had some injury before where you had some swelling, you jammed a finger, you twisted an ankle, and you get this swollen tissue in that area of the body. Same thing happens, but when it happens in the lungs and you get this swelling, you can actually choke your own airways and prevent yourself from breathing. So if you can just reduce that swelling, you should hopefully be able to breathe a little bit better. And I mentioned a few video lectures ago hydrochloroquine, which is a drug that was being tested to treat coronavirus and was getting a lot of attention on the news and was entering different clinical trials. I think that was the idea behind it. Hydrochloroquine does have some antivirus properties, so it can kill viruses and disrupt viruses, but I think more importantly, it seems to be an anti-inflammatory, and I think that's what doctors were thinking when they tried to give it to people. So it's something that kind of suppresses your own immune system and your own inflammatory response, and that would help people breathe better even if they had the coronavirus. So usually hydrochloroquine was paired with antibiotics to see if that was improving people's condition. I think now we have some data to show that it didn't seem to work all that well. So there are some things that are being tested. Something I just heard about, like, I think it was like 2 days ago, is a heartburn medication, Pepcid AC. You've probably seen the commercials on TV for Pepcid. Doctors were trying that, and it seemed to have some beneficial effects for severe cases of coronavirus. And they don't think Pepcid AC has anything to do with killing the virus. It's just that it reduces swelling, and that seems to help people survive when they have this really bad pneumonia from the virus. So that's a whole branch of medications that, as you hear about more, you can kind of ask yourself, okay, is this something that's killing the virus, or is this something that's treating the swelling and the pneumonia aspect of coronavirus? All right, moving on to the kind of final branch of medications here, which are, I think, going to be probably the most important moving forward, and these would be antiviral. So these are medications that actually kill the virus in your body. So you take this medication, it's not to help you breathe or to clear up your pneumonia or reduce swelling. This is to kill the virus in your body, or at least disrupt the virus so it can no longer work, effectively killing it. So the hard part about developing a drug like this is that, remember, viruses are made of proteins and DNA, and pretty much everything that you're made of is what a virus is made of. So yeah, lots of things kill viruses. Bleach kills viruses, but you can't put bleach in your body because it kills you as well. So the real challenge is finding something that kills a virus that doesn't kill you. That is exceedingly challenging. There is a drug that's being tested called remdesivir, that you might have heard about it on the news. If you've been watching the news and following things, it is an antiviral, and it actually targets, there is something called an enzyme that helps the virus make copies of itself. If we remember way back to our first video lecture, viruses are using your cells to make copies of themselves and spread through your body, but they don't actually eat anything or make copies directly themselves. But they do use this tool to make copies of themselves, and this drug targets that enzyme that helps the virus make copies. And the idea is that if the virus can't make as many copies of itself, then it's not going to spread as quickly through your body, and it's going to give you a chance for your body to beat it on its own using the immune system and antibodies. It seems to be marginally effective, but certainly not a cure. for severe cases of coronavirus in the first trials that have come out, it seemed to reduce hospital stays and maybe slightly decrease the death rate by about, maybe 10 or 20% for patients that got this drug, which is significant, but also not exactly a cure. So this remdesivir is like a chemical that is designed to slow the virus down in your body to let your own immune system defeat the virus and have a better chance of defeating the virus. And specifically, what aspect of your immune system that defeats the virus is typically antibodies. And as a reminder, for the third or fourth time, antibodies are these things that your immune system creates that kind of latch onto the virus and prevent it from binding to your cell and kind of block it off and prevent it from infecting your cells. That's what an antibody is. So something that is being tried right now is that if you're somebody who has already got the virus and you've gotten better, so you got sick, but then you've gotten better, that means that your immune system created antibodies that killed off the virus in your body. And scientists were thinking, well, these antibodies should, in concept, still be in your blood. And so if we take the blood of somebody who has recovered from the virus, we can isolate those antibodies, and that's called a serum. Basically, you separate the blood out and you try to just grab only the blood proteins, the antibodies that are in the blood, and we can give the antibodies from somebody who's recovered from the virus to somebody who's really sick. And the idea is that these antibodies coming from the recovered person, moving into the sick person, are going to help kill the virus in the sick person's body. So that would be a blood serum transfusion. So if people that have gotten sick and have gotten better, a lot of them are starting to donate their blood, and so that doctors can give their antibodies to somebody who is really sick and in need of antibodies. So it would act as kind of like a little boost to the sick person's antibody supply count, and might help reduce the count of viruses in their body for a moment. A problem with this is that it's unclear how many antibodies are still present in recovered patients' bodies, in their blood after they have recovered, and it's also unclear how long the benefit lasts to the sick person. And so these trials are all still ongoing. I think it probably would help somewhat, and it's kind of a neat concept, and in a way for people to kind of, people who have recovered from the virus to help kind of treat the next wave that's coming behind them. So it's an interesting idea. A problem with this in terms of being like a total cure is that if you have a reproductive rate of a virus that is above 1, that means that for every person that is sick and recovered, there's going to be 2 or 3 more sick people coming down the road. That means there's just not going to be enough blood from recovered people to go to all the sick people. So there is potentially an issue with that, but overall it's a neat idea. And we have one last concept to talk about, and I will just we'll go into story time mode for a second before I detail that last treatment. So way back when I was younger in college, there was a class called Vertebrate Natural History that I took, and routinely as part of the class, we would go down to we would take field trips, or we would go down to local creeks and bayous, and we would catch snakes and tag them and keep data on how many snakes were in these different creeks and bayous around campus. It was pretty crazy. But as part of that class, I caught several snakes, and I remember the first one I ever grabbed. I was in the water. There was a snake on the bank. This thing was like 3.5, maybe 4 feet long. And I asked the professor, "So you just kind of grab it And he was like, well, the most important thing is don't let the snake get away. So don't be, if you grab it, just grab a hold of it good and don't worry if it bites you. And this particular snake was not venomous. And so I grabbed the snake and it commenced to just start biting me on the arm repeatedly. And then I kind of threw it in a bag so that we could tag it later. It was a very weird experience. But that snake was not venomous. However, our professor always told us that if you're going to grab a snake while we're out, make sure you tell me first so that I can take a look at it and make sure it's not a poisonous snake. And he said, you really don't want to get bit by a poisonous snake. Not only could you die, but actually if you go to the hospital, they will give you something called Antivenom. And a lot of times your insurance won't pay for it. And it costs like somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 a dose for this Antivenom. And we were all like, why would this Antivenom cost so much? And he said, because it's made from a blood serum from a horse. We were like, what? And so to make Antivenom, which is a medication that you take after you've been bitten by a snake, and you put it in your bloodstream and it stops the venom from acting on your body, is actually made by injecting horses with snake venom repeatedly, like low doses of snake venom, taking their blood out and extracting the antibodies from the horse blood. And those antibodies bind to the venom and prevent it from messing up your body. And the reason it's so expensive is it takes a lot of horse blood to make antivenom, to make enough antibodies to actually make a difference when you get bit by a snake. And I was like, that's insane. Really? They make antivenom by injecting horses with venom? That's crazy. And it turns out that was like 10 years ago, but there's been a whole bunch of research on this subject in the meantime. So scientists have realized that you can inject animals with things like viruses, and the animal will produce antibodies in their blood, and you can take those antibodies out of the blood. And then if some human is sick with that virus, you can give them the antibodies from the animal because apparently they're compatible. The antibodies work against the virus. They don't have anything to do with humans or animals or whatever. And okay, that's cool, but it's really expensive because you're drawing all this blood from animals, like the antivenom in the horse. It was like $10,000 a dose. But scientists now have made some really recent breakthroughs where instead of using the blood serum from animals, they can actually make what's called monoclonal antibodies. So instead of, again, drawing the blood and separating the antibodies out from the blood, what you do, remember, there is some cell in the animal's body that actually makes the antibody. And if scientists can isolate that cell that creates the antibody and can grow it and can stimulate it correctly, they kind of have a unlimited supply of antibodies. And that is what a monoclonal antibody is. And so in this little diagram, you can see animals can be used to create virus antibodies and blood serums, but that's very expensive. But if you take the immune cells from animals, isolate them, and grow cultures of them, and the way you do this is usually in some kind of big container. You sort of have this cell in there and you give it all the nutrients it needs to survive and replicate. And then if you tweak the conditions right now, you can get that cell to produce massive amounts of antibodies very cheaply. And so here the diagram says you can take the spleen cell from a mouse and you infuse it with it, and it takes some time to develop the correct cell culture that you need. But once you have them, then you can harvest these antibodies from the cells directly without having to deal with the mouse anymore. There is actually a really widely used rheumatoid arthritis drug that's made this way. and it's called Humira, and tons of it's made each year, and it's given to lots of people. And I don't see any reason why, and why you couldn't do this for virus antibodies. And actually, there are several companies that are already working on this for the coronavirus. One in particular, Regeneron, a while back actually did this for the Ebola virus. So they designed cell culture. I believe it was from a rabbit. Well, that might have been a rat, where they found the immune cells that could create Ebola antibodies, and they grew them and harvested these Ebola antibodies. And Ebola is normally like very fatal disease. It kills like 1 out of 3 people that get it. And there was a recent outbreak in Africa where this company used their monoclonal antibody drug to treat Ebola patients, and I think they got the death rate down to less than 5%. So it went from like 30% down to 5%, almost to the point where, that was like, I mean, a lot of people were saying basically we have a cure for Ebola now because of this. This, I think, has some real potential to be a breakthrough, but that Ebola one took years to make, and so the question will be, can we kind of get this process going faster and figure it all out before that long? So that is monoclonal antibodies. This stuff, that when we're talking about kind of the future of medicine, I think this could be something that completely changes how we treat contagious diseases. I mean, if you can just make the antibodies out of immune cells and just give them to people instead of having to rely on their own immune system to make those antibodies, that's amazing. Amazing technology. All right, so that was an overview of the different medications and treatments that are available for coronavirus. As you can see, there's nothing right now that is a cure. And it's very dangerous. If you see something online that's advertising a cure, it's probably bogus. There are several treatments that could be effective for it, both therapeutic, things that treat the symptoms, and then also antivirals, which are things that are designed to target and kill the virus. In particular, I think the most promising would be these monoclonal antibodies. If we could get those working, that would be as close to a cure as we're going to get, I think. So I hope you find that informative, and hopefully now you understand some of the medicines that are being tested and are in the works right now. All right, so I thought I'd close today with giving you some updates on the world, kind of like I used to before all the classes got canceled. So a few things, and we're going to have Luna as our mascot today. So a few things. Some countries, the long prophesized second wave that is coming as we lift restrictions and start opening up more things, that we're going to have the second wave of viruses, cases. Yeah, he's jealous. Does that seem like it's happening? There is some evidence, not really in the United States. We'll talk about what's going on here lately. Oh my goodness, jealous doggos. All right. There are a couple countries where there is some evidence of this idea of a second wave as the country is lifting restrictions. Korea had for a long time almost no new cases, less than 10 a day. And a lot of those were not local transmission, so those were coming in from other countries. So it seemed like they were, they had kind of defeated their curve and had pretty much eradicated the virus in their country. They started opening up more things. They even started opening up things like bars and restaurants. And now in the last couple of days, they've had a spike in cases. Pretty much all of them have been tied to VARs. So, you know, that's kind of what you would expect to happen. Another country that we don't really know what's going on there right now is Iran, but Iran is also showing a similar pattern where okay, you were just struggling to get out. What are you doing? Iran was showing a decline in cases. You're just not going to let me do this? So Iran was this country where, you know, we don't know entirely what's going on. They don't have the, I guess, the best freedom of information there, but it seemed like things were going pretty poorly for a while, and then the numbers they were reporting said that cases were going down and that they were opening things up. But now recently the numbers they're reporting is that the numbers are going back up again, almost exactly like that curve that we looked at several weeks ago of how the numbers started going down. And then once you open it up and the reproductive rate gets above 1, it starts growing exponentially again. It looks pretty identical to that curve. Some other news that is worrying. I talked about Russia a few weeks back and saying that, you know, China and Russia seem to be taking a very aggressive stance, yet didn't seem to have many cases going on there. And I implied that they might be lying about things. Well, Russia recently has either ramped up testing immensely or just started reporting more accurate data, but there are climbing very, very rapidly in the world and now have almost as many cases per day as the United States does, and will soon surpass all of Europe for the most cases. They are still reporting a very, very, very low death count. So that is a bit interesting there in Russia, but it is definitely growing exponentially. Another country to keep your eye on is Brazil. Brazil's president, this might sound familiar, has called the virus just the flu and nothing to worry about, and has basically done nothing to stop the virus, and now it is growing exponentially in that country very, very rapidly. And I thought I'd just show you, you know, if it's hard to take it seriously still. I feel like I'm kind of the only one talking about it anymore, but I'll show you a clip of the video I saw coming out of Brazil the other day. It's looking pretty gnarly there.
Now it is Latin America's turn to face the pain of the COVID-19 storm that spread west across the globe. In Brazil, the health service is ill-prepared. In truth, it's already overwhelmed. They know this. They can't fight this virus. They're digging thousands upon thousands of graves in the city of Sao Paulo. More than 13,000 are planned. Medical workers haven't given up hope. But there is no battle, no real war here. They're facing defeat. In full hazmat gear, the grave diggers and burial teams struggle over the freshly dug earth. Grieving family members follow behind. This is the funeral of Jose de Oliveira. He was 52 years old. He died after a few hours in hospital. The authorities say it was COVID. His son Felipe insists it wasn't. There is a stigma to this disease, and there's no testing anyway. Every family is allowed 5 minutes at the graveside. Every 5 minutes, there is another burial. The graves are separate, but the dead are covered over en masse. To all intents and purposes, this is a mass grave.
So that speaks for itself, what the stakes are here. And India is also a country I've been keeping an eye on. India's coronavirus cases are growing very, very rapidly. And India is the most populated nation in the world. So if they don't get control of it and it spreads through that population, you're going to have hundreds of millions of cases potentially by the time this is done. So yeah, that's all going on. What's going on with the United States? The good news here is that the cases and deaths seem to be trending down, although mostly that is happening in New York, where they are trending down very, very quickly. New York was the epicenter of this virus for our country, and a lot of the growth of the virus initially was in New York. And so as it's falling, it also is sort of showing that the cases in the United States are trending down. However, if you look at all cases besides New York, the number seems to be flat or maybe trending up still. And locally in Texas, we had, in the last week, we've had the most new cases in a day. And I believe, I'm just looking at the data today in Harris County, the data is a bit weird. They didn't report any cases yesterday, but today they reported more cases than any other day for the entire pandemic. So that's not a good sign, and it's not too surprising that we have been easing up all kinds of restrictions and opening up restaurants and more businesses. And, you know, when you do that, cases are going to go up. The thing about Texas and Harris County reporting so many new cases is that it implies that if the new cases are increasing, that means the reproductive rate of the virus is probably over 1. And if you remember from the video a while back, that means that it will grow exponentially. And, you know, a lot of people are saying, okay, so what if it kind of grows? You know, yeah, it's growing, but it's not growing out of control. Well, the nature of exponential growth is that every day will be worse than the last day until it's out of control. So there are some pretty unwise decisions being made, in my opinion, at the government level. So that's it. That'll give you a little update on what's going on in the world in terms of cases. Right now, as of this video being made, we are at 4.3 million cases worldwide. I think when we first started making these, when I first did this, my very first video, way back when, I think we were at 500,000 cases worldwide. So we're almost 10 times that now. We're getting to there. And in Harris County, I remember saying in our first video that there was 100 or 200 cases total. Now we had that many just in one day, new cases, not total cases. And our total case count is something right now is closing in on 5,000. So yeah, definitely, you know, it seems like a lot of people are out and about now in Houston, and I mean, depending on where you are, but it seems like the feeling is that either we don't think the virus, we think it's over or it's safe to go out now, or that we just don't care anymore. But neither of them bodes well. So we'll keep an eye on that. I only have one more video to make, and then after that you are free from hearing me ever talk about coronavirus again, because you will be graduated from high school. For those of you that are tuning in from my class, the rest of you, maybe I'll keep making some videos over the summer. But until next time, take it easy, be safe. It's still out there. And next video, we'll kind of wrap up everything and mainly focus on zoonosis. Until then.